You're tuned into the Unnecessary Harm podcast, where we drill down on issues of substance use and its cultural impact. Your host, Shane Barco, Executive Director of the Delgado Institute, with over 40 years experience in youth and community work and a passion for building resilience.
Hey, welcome back to the Unnecessary Harm podcast. Good to have you back with us. And for those who are chiming in for the first time, welcome on board. It's good to have new visitors to our platform. Today's guest brings decades of frontline legal experience to the complex intersections of addiction, public health and policy. His work in holding the marijuana industry accountable for societal harm speaks directly to one of the Unnecessary Harm podcast's key missions, and that is to expose root causes of addiction and prevent unnecessary harms. His perspective sharpens the focus on regulatory and prevention-based approaches, pushing back against narratives that normalise substance use. Firmly grounded in demand reduction principles, our guest advocates for robust prevention, drug-free policies and legal accountability. He offers a critical counterbalance to increasingly failed harm reduction models, emphasising the societal costs of permissive drug laws and the urgent need for public policy rooted in science and community well-being and not the faux rights claims of drug users. He is a founding member of Americans Against Legalizing Marijuana, the architect of and senior counsel in C.I.V.E.L, which is the Cannabis Industry Victims Educating Litigators, a legal platform tasked specifically to go after the toxic rogue industry, that is cannabis. Author of 6 legal textbooks on addiction and law and policy. Sorry, Vic, I'll just cut that section out. I'll reread that. So we check on that. What's that? 140. Yeah. Stuff that one up. He is author of 6 legal textbooks on addiction and law and... there it is again. Author of 6 legal textbooks on addiction, law and policy, or part thereof. Expert witness in drug-free workplace programs and drug testing policies. And he has well over 40 years of legal experience focusing on addiction treatment, prevention, and public policy. I could say a lot more about Dave, but I really want to get into this topic today, mate. David Evans Esquire, welcome to the Unnecessary Harm podcast.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Brilliant. It's good that we got there eventually. It's you're in the evening there where you are in the US, so thanks for taking the time. It's really good. I remember just a bit of an anecdote here. I remember years ago, and the reason I'm saying this is kind of introduce some of our interactions. I was on a plane a long time ago, and the gentleman stood up and he had this big T-shirt blazoned across it. It's a quote from Shakespeare. The first thing we do is kill all the lawyers. And I laughed, and I said to him, so you don't like lawyers? He says, I am one. Of course I don't like lawyers. And then he went into this whole monologue about jokes about lawyers, and so I had a few lawyer jokes, and he hadn't heard them, so we exchanged it. And I remember we until the Netherlands this year in March, we hadn't met previously. We had a lot to do with each other online, and loved your research, loved your work, and we've interacted on a number of different platforms, but never met personally. And when I met you in the Netherlands, I made that comment about that, and you didn't hold back. You, without missing a beat, you said, "Oh, I'm the worst kind of lawyer. I'm an ambulance chaser and personal injury lawyer." And I laughed. I thought it was really funny, and I thought they're the butt of a lot of jokes, and we hear a lot about that. But I have personal experience with personal injury law, and they're incredibly important. And I tell you what, they were just an absolute gold asset for us when we went through our issues. So for those out there who don't like personal injury lawyers, get over it. They're an important asset to the community. Anyway, I digress. Sorry about that, mate. Look, before we get into the nasty arena of cannabis legalization and all the mayhem that's ensued from that catastrophe that's happened in the US, and it's obviously in Canada as well, tell us, our listeners, a little bit more about your journey into practicing law. Obviously, you've been doing it a long time, 4 decades. So what was the journey when you started out? What kind of led you into that space, David?
Well, I got, while I was in law school, which was from 1970 to 73, I got involved in dealing with addictions issue. I came into law school during my first year of recovery from substance abuse. And so I was in my first year of getting sober and going to law school. So I had that interest because of my own personal experience with addiction. And several years later, I got involved in dealing with marijuana. I chaired an American Bar Association committee on alcohol and drug law reform, and some lawyers came to me with a proposal about medical marijuana. And I listened to them, and I thought, well, this made sense. Why should we, keep this healing substance away from people? And it was the biggest professional mistake I ever made. I'm responsible for the American Bar Association being in favor of medical marijuana. And after I got that through the ABA House of Delegates, a couple of women from the Mothers Anti-Drug Group got a hold of me, put me in the back seat of their car, and beat up on me for about an hour. And I realized that I had made a big mistake. And my mistake was that I didn't listen. I didn't say, well, is there another side to this issue? I thought I was being quite heroic by advocating for this, and realized I'd made a big mistake. So that's what got me hooked into the marijuana legalization. And this would have been about the mid-1980s. Back then, we had a lot more luck with defeating legalization. We won probably 99% of our battles. But when medical marijuana came in, it allowed the marijuana industry to get a lot of revenue, which they then plowed back into getting more states to be in favor of medical marijuana. And then they got very wealthy from that, and then started state by state trying to get marijuana legalized for recreational purposes. So it starts with medical marijuana, and they gain influence and revenue through that, and then they've tried to get legalization. The problem that we have in the United States is that they outnumber us in terms of resources, in terms of financial resources. I'll give you an example. In Florida last year, they had a ballot initiative where the citizens could vote to legalize marijuana. And the marijuana industry put $150 million into that fight. One company put in 140 million out of that 150 million. And I think the most that we could raise was maybe 20 million. So this is the way it is. We can raise a couple $100,000. They come in with $1 million. And the biggest problem we have is the public perception that marijuana is benign, that it's not harmful. And that starts with coming to accept it as a medicine. There is no proof that it's a medicine. We have looked at all of the data. And it's just a big lie that's being promulgated. The same thing was done with opiates.
Yeah, I'll jump in on that, Dave, because that's an important thing that we'll probably tick into a bit later on. But I'm interested in this journey into the battleground and the mistake you made. And I love the fact that you're honest and open about that. I think that's a really important distinction, that you bought the narrative that was inculcated for a long time. I mean, 1993, I've got a video of the head of then of, I think it was NORML, the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Law, at the 50th anniversary, I think it was, of the discovery of LSD. They were talking about a platform about how they're going to get marijuana recreationally released in America, because it's this great substance. It's the panacea of all ills. It's the most benign of all psychotropic toxins. It's fantastic. And he was saying the best way we're going to get that done is through the medical model. Now, it's interesting that the history, and you'll know this better than most, that in the States during the 70s and 80s under the Reagans, particularly, they just say no to drugs, which is maligned and mocked by the pro-drug advocates, actually worked. It had a 50% decrease in substance use, particularly in the high end. But what happened is that in America in the 70s, marijuana use was, in fact, up until recently, until the last 10 years, it was at its highest level of use. But once they went after it and called it out for what it was plummeting until the mid-90s, when they finally got through this medical marijuana tick, and all of a sudden the narrative shifted. Well, if it's medicine, it can't be that bad. And you've just tipped on the opiate thing, which we'll get into a bit later on. But so then big tobacco 2.0, which is the big cannabis industry, They got in behind this, as you've just beautifully articulated, and they've gone, you know what? We can make this puppy work if we sell the faux narrative of medical marijuana. And we know from the evidence, because in Australia, just to make it clear what Dave's saying about the evidence about cannabis as a therapeutic properties, therapeutic capacities, is limited. In Australia, we've had what they call a medicinal version of cannabis as a medicine under the brand name Sativex, and another brand name called Dramanol. But basically, it's used for patients suffering with chemotherapy as an appetite stimulant. So that's been on our public system for a while. So in that context, it has a pharmaceutical grade medicine available, prescribed by doctors for that particular outcome. And but after all, 50 years of 60 years, arguably, of promise and potential, and all the carry on about this thing being the great panacea of all ills, the only other pharmaceutical grade, properly trialed, double-blind, placebo-accounted for trial medicine that's come to the market was done by GW Pharma, which is now Jazz Pharmaceutical, after 10, 11 years and $1.3 billion, was called Epidiolex or Epidiolex, depending which country you come from. And it is a fourth-line treatment for Dravet syndrome, epilepsy, and other types of medication-resistant epilepsy. So it is a fourth-line treatment. It has a 25% efficacy. But that's the only other new medicine that has hit the table, yet the industry keeps sprouting all these claims, as you said, are completely false, absolutely false. So as part of this process, tell us a little bit more about the faux narrative around medicine, and then tell us about the creation of C.I.V.E.L, which is that entity that you've created.
Well, the thing about it being medicine, the people that are decision makers are usually older people. And the marijuana that was around when they were in college or high school was the marijuana that they remember. It was maybe 2-3% THC. So when they think of marijuana, they think of, in the United States, we call it the Woodstock weed from that music festival back in the 60s. That's their perception of marijuana. So what the marijuana industry has done is that they've used that perception, but at the same time have increased the potency of the marijuana. So we now have marijuana products in the United States that are 99% THC. Your average edible is 85-95% THC. It's a very different drug than the Woodstock weed. But everybody has that old perception of it. And every administration, it started with the Clinton administration. Then George Bush came in for 8 years. I blame him more than anybody else because he could have ended it and he didn't do it. And I think they were afraid to take on the medicine, and people were going to complain that they were not getting their medicine. Then Obama came in and then just completely opened the door to legalization, didn't enforce any of the federal law. Trump came in and didn't do anything. Okay. Then Biden came in and tried to open the door even further to get marijuana rescheduled so it would be a medicine. And now we've got Trump again, and we don't know yet what he's going to do. People that are key in his administration, some of them are very anti-marijuana, but his chief of staff was a marijuana lobbyist. Okay. So we just don't have a reading yet on where they're going to go.
Yeah, because federally it's still an issue there. I love that's kind of still in play, and they want to try and get the law changed for banking purposes, at least on one level, and rescheduling. But it's interesting that the data coming out, and even commentary that's been published in JAMA recently about this, is really, really important, because it is saying that this is a bad move to reschedule this.
Yeah, and I think the tide is beginning to turn now. I mean, we've started winning some ballot initiatives, and my home state, North Carolina, they tried to get medical marijuana through. They couldn't even get the bill before a committee because there's all of the information about marijuana. The true information is now coming out about how it increases your risk of having a heart attack and then psychosis. We have a lawsuit going right now where a guy who is a professional athlete started using the hemp products that have delta 8 THC,
Yes.
delta 10 THC,
Yeah.
became psychotic. And in a psychosis and a hallucination, he jumped off a bridge and damaged his body so that he can no longer be a professional athlete. So we filed a lawsuit that saying that this was a product liability issue, and they failed to warn him that it caused psychosis. The marijuana people filed a motion to throw the case out. The judge did not throw it out. We just got that word today. So we're now going to be allowed to go forward with the lawsuit.
Brilliant. I want to talk to that. Yeah, I'll just jump in there, Dave. I want to drill down on that a bit later on in the interview, because I think that's something that's really fascinating. And another win you've had recently with the AAJ, and we'll talk about that later on. But just with getting back to the marijuana, and you've seen some changes, but the early days of your pushback against this rogue industry, and that's what it is. It's an addiction for profit, juggernaut. But what are some of the, if you can speak to that, I mean, from a legal perspective, and obviously without breaching any confidences in our legal protocols, what are some of the really nasty, dirty tactics the industry use, both legally and perhaps not so legally, in the public square to get their messaging and their product in play?
Well, I want to talk a little bit about marijuana users first.
Sure.
Marijuana really, when you become addicted to it, takes you over body and soul. And it becomes something you need for your existence. It's a life and death issue for you. So they don't have any trouble getting these people out to legislative hearings. Okay. So when you have a legislative hearing, you'll see a room full of these people, maybe who've been bussed in from out of state.
Yeah.
And the legislature thinks, gee, there's 90, 100 people here. There must be a lot of public support for this. So that's one thing that happens. Okay. They talk about marijuana being benign, how it can reduce anxiety, how it can be used for chemotherapy, and they say that many minorities, blacks or Hispanics, are in prison for possession of small amounts of marijuana, which is a complete lie. It's a lie. It's an absolute lie. It just isn't happening. The average that somebody goes to jail for in the United States, the average amount of marijuana is 115 pounds. Okay, so that's not a personal user. Okay, so they spread lies like this, and unfortunately, we sometimes don't have enough financial resources to counter that. We come in with the evidence. The weakest positions we have are with these ballot initiatives where a whole state votes on the voting day, and we have to reach out to an entire state.
Yeah.
Where we have better luck is when they try to get it through a legislature. There we're better because we can go in and talk to the legislators and give them the information, and then they say, oh, wait a minute, well, I didn't know that about marijuana. But it's a very dangerous drug. We Americans Against Legalizing Marijuana put out a booklet on the risks of marijuana, and we show how it contributes and you were helpful with that. It shows all of the diseases that can be caused and the physical damage that can be caused by marijuana, which people are just not aware of. So we're battling that myth that the marijuana industry puts forth, that this is benign, it's helpful. If you're not in favor of this, you're somehow an uncool person. You're a prohibitionist.
And you're
against people having fun. Yeah. So it's starting to turn now. I think the media, I've noticed in the last year or two, there's more and more articles now about the dangers of marijuana, how it causes heart attacks and causes psychosis and causes driving incidents and violence. We did research on the mass killings in the United States, and many of them, a majority of them, were connected with marijuana. The killers were using marijuana. For example, the guy in Texas that shot up a school, his mother and grandmother tried to get him off marijuana. He shot his grandmother in the face and went into the school and killed all those kids. And we see that whenever you see a very bizarre killing, people cutting off heads and things like that, I always look for marijuana, and we have found it. People have trouble believing that because there's this public perception that marijuana makes you relaxed and friendly and, musical and laid back, when in
Yeah.
fact it completely can destroy your mind and send you into a psychosis. We have a case here where a young woman who was a doctor in audiology went over to smoke some pot off a bong of a friend of hers, and the guy had put a lot of high potency marijuana in there. She went into a psychosis and stabbed him over 100 times for no reason, and killed him, killed her own dog. And when the police got there, she was stabbing herself.
Yeah.
And they had to mace her and, get her to stop doing it. She is one of the nicest people you could ever want to meet. Okay. She was completely psychotic at the time, and it was because of the marijuana.
Yeah, and that's a really important thing, because one of the things that we did about 2 or 3 years ago, we were asked to advise on a health workers union committee about talking about training staff, because crystal meth historically has been problematic, and of course a lot of behavioural issues around that are quite psychotic, out of control. Violence is not always the case with crystal meth, but quite common, and very agitated, very so it's really. And again, that was kind of the messaging that was when people come into the emergency room. If they're acting out that way, the substance is probably crystal meth, ice. But what we found, the very same thing, the research we were doing, both on the properties of cannabis and the outcomes, were that the high-end cannabis, high THC content cannabis, was causing psychotic breaks. And even the what is the group over the National HCI group, your big medical group over there, they did a publication on that cannabis, high-end cannabis, THC cannabis, was twice as likely to move a person from a temporary psychosis into a psychotic disorder, twice as much as LSD, and higher than all the other stimulants that are in play. So you're dead right. And we had to advise this group and said, look for the cannabis connection. It may be meth, yes, because it's quite prominent here. But I can tell you now, the high-end cannabis that's in play now is causing this problem, and it's manifest all over the place, as you just indicated. So you're dead right. And these kind of behaviors are shocking. So how that case with this woman, are you aware of the outcome of that? What sort of eventuated from that?
Well, she was prosecuted, and they went to trial, and the judge accepted that she had a marijuana psychosis. She was convicted of, I think, something along the lines of involuntary manslaughter,
Yes.
and wound up being placed on probation. And part of her probation is to go out and tell people about what happened to her. What we're seeing, particularly with young people, is that they go into a psychosis and commit suicide.
Yeah.
And we have, I think, 5 or 6 cases right now where that has happened. Beautiful 17-year-old girl from California came home, texted a friend of hers that she had eaten a gummy that had high potency THC. And she said, there's something wrong here. I need to go to the hospital. For some reason, she left her house and jumped off a bridge and died. We have people that have shot themselves, walked in front of trains in a psychotic reaction. My client, who was the athlete, was a professional track and field athlete, went to a very fine university, was probably going to be the #1 shot putter in the world, and started using this stuff, thought it was okay because it wasn't Delta 9 THC, it was Delta 8.
That's right.
And went into a full-blown psychosis, for which he's still having to work to recover 2 years later.
Wow.
And completely ruined his athletic career. Very smart guy, very nice guy, very competent individual, comes from a good family, and this is what happened to him. And we're seeing this over and over again in emergency rooms as cannabis-induced psychosis.
Yeah. And I think that's an important thing, because a lot of the times the stereotype of historically of cannabis users, you've got the Cheech and Chong model. They're stoners. It's all about being hilarious and off your face and chilling out in the back of a Cadillac, smoke, blah, blah. It's ha, ha, ha. But the reality is, as you've just indicated again, and we know the evidence is crystal clear on this, it's irrefutable. High-end THC from whatever version, 8, 9, 10, or whatever you want to do, will create a psychotic episode in a person. Now, the severity of that varies from person to person. We understand that. But we're talking about academically, socially, professionally, strong, competent, non-act out kind of people. I'm lost my words on this, but I hate to use the word normal, but people that are just functional, bright, sharp. They're not interested in, getting stoned or wasted or high. That's not their thing. But they've bought the narrative that this is going to help them, be beneficial. And that medical umbrella that now masks so much of this shocking, ballistic mess that's in play is as a real lie that's been perpetrated on the culture. And this is where C.I.V.E.L, and your group have come in and I think what's happening, and you said the evidence is now unfurling more and more that this is a mistake, and now we're trying to wind it back. And we thought we would have learned from Big Tobacco 1.0. It took, 50 years to rein that animal in. And the same playbook's been put into motion here. Yet we're pretending, this is different. We won't make the same mistake with this as we did with cigarettes and tobacco, with alcohol. We're going to do this better. And, of course, it's not better because this is a volatile substance that can be manipulated in all sorts of directions, as we've seen, and can do all sorts of damage. But you've talked about the obviously the lawsuits, which is really great. And any more you can talk about, fantastic, be awesome. But one of the goals of C.I.V.E.L and the Americans against legalizing marijuana was attained recently, and you've celebrated the legal milestone as the American Association for Justice, the nation's largest association of trial lawyers, has officially launched the Cannabis Injury Litigation Group, a nationwide coalition of attorneys committed to representing victims of marijuana-related harm. Now, I want to read an excerpt for our listeners from a press release. As states liberalise marijuana laws, the cannabis industry has expanded rapidly in a race, I love that, a race to dominate market share before the implementation of meaningful regulations. Again, this is what we do. Open the gate, get the horse out, running through the paddock, and then try and shut the gate afterwards. The industry is selling potent cannabis products with TH levels ranging up to 100%, while also marketing these dangerous products with bright packaging, flavors, and names intended to be attractive to young adults. With the increase in potency and youth-oriented marketing, there is a new epidemic of cannabis-related cannabis-related injuries, including cannabis-induced psychosis and a severe and potentially devastating lifelong injury. Now, clearly, this new litigation group is a win for you. How's that going to add to your, obviously, for a large part, solo fight for a long time? What's that mean for you, Dave, and the sector?
Well, it's a dream I've had. I started on this quest to get the legal profession involved back in 2018. And it was largely because I lost faith in government to deal with this. The government was too easily bribed. They were cowardly. They were seeking revenue for their government. And they just weren't doing the job. The same thing happened with opiates. Yeah. The United States government, Congress, passed a law during the Obama administration that limited the ability of our Drug Enforcement Administration to go after the opiate industry. I got a unanimous vote in Congress. And at the time, we said to them, you're going to have an opiate epidemic if you pass this law. And They passed it. Yeah. And it was the same thing. They said, well, people are in pain. Doctors should be careful about pain. Doctors have a responsibility for pain. So doctors felt that they should start giving out opiates. And they told lies about oxycodone. They said it was not addictive. Yeah. So doctors said, well, I'm responsible for patients' pain. It's a medicine. It's not addictive. Take as many as you want. Same thing happened with tobacco. I can remember the heads of the tobacco companies testifying before Congress that nicotine was not addictive. They all said that. They created the Tobacco Institute to show that it actually could improve your health. It could reduce weight. They had ads with doctors saying, this is good for you, and it soothes your throat. So there was a lawsuit by the United States government against the tobacco companies, and there was a judgment against the tobacco companies. It was a 1,600-page opinion that this judge wrote. If you take the word tobacco out of that and put the word marijuana in, it was a perfect fit. Everything that the tobacco companies did to promote tobacco, the marijuana companies are using now.
Same playbook.
And so I thought, look, we have to find a group that is relentless, fearless, has a financial interest in going after the marijuana industry, and those are personal injury lawyers, okay? I mean, they're not afraid of anybody, okay? They'll sue big corporations, they'll sue the government, they don't care. So it was years and years of trying to educate lawyers, get them on board, and finally what happened because of the increase in psychosis, that lawyers started paying attention. So now there's a bunch of lawsuits having to do with psychosis. They're still in progress. There hasn't been trials yet and so forth. But as soon as somebody wins a multi-million-dollar judgment against a marijuana company, every lawyer is going to be on board with us. They're going to go, they're the ones that are going to save the country, just like they did with opiates, just like they did with tobacco. Very few people in the United States now smoke. I mean, I know one person that smokes. But when I was a kid, everybody smoked.
Of course.
And it's because of, these lawsuits. And the same thing with the opiates now. It is now more difficult for a doctor to prescribe opiates because they're aware that they shouldn't be doing it. And we want to do the same thing with marijuana.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Yeah, and I think, and that's what's scary. We had on our guest recently on the podcast, Sam Quinones, the author of Dreamland and The Least of Us, which is he's a journalist who looked at the whole opioid crisis and what happened there, and as the perfect storm of what you've just talked about, as well as obviously economic issues and lack of loss of community. So that perfect storm of every pain, personal, emotional pain, everything's trauma, and then it became the panacea to everyone's ills, and then it created its own epidemic, which we're now still paying for. But you're right, and he said marijuana is in the same boat. We're just repeating the same thing with weed. He said, I can't believe this is happening. But again, the idea of the smokescreen that this is somehow better than opiates, and it won't, like the argument is, it won't kill you straight out. And people say, oh, marijuana doesn't kill. I said, well, then tobacco doesn't kill either. Clearly, that's a stupid comment. But we just released a report through WRD News on this. So does cannabis kill? And it does, in all sorts of ways. And you've just indicated many of those in your sharing with us today. But what I'm fascinated by is, Dave, is that we seem to have to go through this, and this is where the legal profession is so important in this context. We have to go through this bizarre experimental phase because people, now the argument here is, I think I'm quoting the great G.K. Chesterton, well, a paraphrased version of, people don't believe a lie because they have to, they believe a lie because they want to. So when they pitch something that's going to alleviate their perceived pain or meet a perceived felt need, and then someone says it's medicine or it's okay, and it gets a legal pass from government, then it's a free-for-all. So that seems to be the tipping point. We got that, and that's why, even though we see these catastrophic outcomes, we saw with tobacco, then we saw with the opioids, we're doing it again with weed. But hopefully this iteration of insanity will be shorter because of what's happening with you guys, and the history of the opioid thing is still rolling on. It's still rippling. And that will hopefully shorten up this insanity from the last, decade and a half, and get it down to maybe a 20-year window where we've gone, gee, that experiment was nuts. And I'm glad that finished 20 years instead of 50. So what are your thoughts in that space, Dave?
Well, I think it's going to be, it's going to take time. I think lawsuits can be very educational because they get a lot of attention. So we got a lot of free press out of it. I think in time people will come to realize what's going on. One of the problems that we have, though, is the state governmental agencies who are supposed to be regulating this right now are protecting the industry. They're not protecting the public. And they're not doing the inspections that they should, because the politicians say, well, this is a source of income for the state and this is beneficial. They ignore a lot of the information that we give them. And we have two lawsuits right now against the state of New York challenging their medical marijuana. And I'll give you an example of how insane this becomes. The state of New York was going to utilize $200 million of state money, tax money, to set up pot stores for people that they called justice involved, people that had prior marijuana convictions. Okay. And they were going to set these stores up and then lease them to people who would then pay the state back for the loan. So, and I said, what other industry gets the state government to set up stores for them? Okay, this is madness. So we have a lawsuit there in New York because there happens to be a state law that says that state tax money can't be used for an illegal purpose. And of course, this is illegal under federal law.
Correct.
So we're hoping that that is successful. And we're challenging the medical marijuana regulations also. We have a lawsuit in New Jersey where we're attacking a town that wants to put a town of 15,000 people. They want to put 6 pot stores in the town, including consumption lounges, where you can go and get high and then walk out of the store. 6 of them in a town of 15,000 people. Now, the reason they want to do this is because just across the river is Rutgers University, which has, 20,000 students there. That's what's going on. And people on the town council that are promoting this, some of them are marijuana users, and we know that for a fact.
Of course.
Yeah. And one of them,
legislators are using the stuff.
Unbelievable. And one of them, when I was testifying before the committee, before they passed these laws, gave me the finger while I was testifying. I was very polite and everything else like that. Now, this is a guy that is a professor, at Seton Hall University in government. So a government professor is giving me the finger while I'm testifying. This is the kind of stuff that goes on. And they feel they become maybe addicted to the marijuana. They feel that whatever they can do is justified in protecting it. They have an existential involvement with it. And this is part of also what we're faced with. But more and more parents are now coming forward saying, look, this is what it did to my child. This is crazy. The emergency rooms have case after case of the psychosis and also the cannabis hyperemesis syndrome, which is uncontrolled vomiting. And, they tell people that the reason that you're vomiting is from marijuana, and the patients refuse to believe it. They say it couldn't be marijuana. It's got to be something else. You're a terrible doctor. You have no idea what you're talking about. Doctor says if you stop using pot, this will go away. People say no, and then they come back a week later. So that's the kinds of things that we're dealing with right now. And there's also a big involvement of the Chinese with marijuana grows in the United States. They have been setting up places in California, Oklahoma, in Maine. The growers that are associated with the Communist Party in China are involved in illegal marijuana growing in the United States. This is something that our Drug Enforcement Administration has just been publishing about. And of course, the Chinese are very involved in the production of fentanyl.
Of course.
And
it's payback from the opium wars 100 years ago, mate. It's payback. I get it.
And people are not aware of that. If that there was an opium war, that the British forced the Chinese to take opium when it was destroying their country, and then now they're getting back at us. They're destroying our country by flooding it in our country. Right?
Yeah, no, that's it. It is payback. What is it? The old saying, "Revenge is a dish best served cold." And I think, the currents of trade, we've actually done video piece on this about 6-7 years ago, and the currents of trade, the only other drug besides alcohol and tobacco that entered the currents of trade was opium, and it was currency, and it absolutely destroyed China. And now we've now added cannabis to the currents of trade, and it's another addiction for profit product that actually destroys communities and public health and private health and productivity. But we're going to make money out of this, and somehow whatever revenue we make, we're going to pull back probably double into reparations in the end, or trying to get society back on track again. But Dave, I'm really, I really was excited about this interview because I, having met you and know a little about your history, and I was thrilled to see that the advent of the AAJ involvement, and looking forward to seeing more of that happen. And we'll keep an eye on this, and obviously we want people to engage with C.I.V.E.L on your website. Have a look at that. Follow what the Americans Against Legalizing Marijuana are doing in the US. So they're another great group, along with other groups in the states that are pushing back against cannabis. But AALM are a great group, and we encourage you to look at their resources. And to, again, follow what Dave's doing with C.I.V.E.L, C.I.V.E.L, which is, again, the... what is it? Sorry, Dave. It is the Cannabis Industry Victims Educating Litigators. And so very, very important. Before we finish up today, Dave, and unless there's something else you really want to share with us, there's a question we always, well, not always, nearly always ask most of our guests. And that is because we one of our programs and one of our platforms is called Fence Builder. It's about building fences at the top of the cliff as opposed to driving ambulances at the bottom. So from your perspective, fence or ambulance, Dave? Fence or ambulance, or a mixture of both?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand something about ambulance.
Yeah, sorry, you missed it. Okay, we have a platform called Fence Builder, right? And which is talking about building fences at the top of the societal cliff as opposed to driving ambulances at the bottom. So we asked the question of most of our guests, not all of them, which do you think is the priority, the fence or the ambulance, or is it a mixture of both?
Oh, I think it's a mixture of both. Yeah. You've got to defend yourself. You got to do prevention, educate people, but then also provide treatment and help people to recover from it. And people can recover from addiction. I've been sober now 56 years, but we have to get people educated about it. And it's now starting to happen with fentanyl. Our fentanyl deaths are reduced. Of course, we've now closed our border, which is a big help. I have a lot of optimism. There's a lot of the medical people coming into the Trump administration are against marijuana. The head of the Food and Drug Administration is. The Attorney General is against marijuana. Other top-level medical people see through all of this. So we're hoping that things will do well. And the legal profession, I have a lot of faith in them. They are ruthless, then fearless, and once they sink their claws into it, there's going to be some big changes as a result of it. Right. And we're hoping that our lawsuits. We just had a big win in New Jersey with a product liability lawsuit. The fellow that was a professional athlete, they tried to throw the case out, and the judge said, no, this case is going to go forward. So that was a big win for us. And hopefully it'll get some national attention. But I very much appreciate what you're doing. I hope that you're smarter than we are in Australia. My father was there during World War II and always praised the Australians, and they were very welcoming to him. And my family's always had a very good opinion of Australia, and I've been there myself. It's a wonderful country. So anything we can do to help you to not do what we did, we would like to help you very much.
And that's one of the reasons we got you on the program, Dave, because that's exactly what we need here. We're not quite down that rabbit hole as far as you guys are, but we're heading there, and it is disturbing what's been done. And of course, again, a lot of the actors in the legislative and policy space are users and or sympathetic towards using, not for medical purposes, but for obviously recreational purposes, and they're just using the medical cloak as a guise to get this done. So yeah, it is a difficult one. Dave, Evans Esquire, thank you so much, my friend, for being with us today. And for those who are listening, I really do encourage you to check out Dave's work and follow this, because I think when this actually lands, it's going to be seismic, and it will be a game changer globally for the so-called cannabis industry. And more importantly, it's going to be a great win for public health and for communities across the world. So again, Dave Evans, thanks for joining us. And thank you guys folks for listening in and joining us on the Unnecessary Harm podcast. And until next time, be safe and avoid the unnecessary harm. Until then, bye.
As we wrap up today's session, remember, each step towards understanding is a step away from unnecessary harm. We're here to empower, inspire, and pave the way for optimal well-being. Stay resilient, stay informed, and continue being the change your community needs. Thank you for joining us at the Unnecessary Harm podcast. Until next time, take care and keep pushing forward.